So, welcome to Moria, and first and foremost, I hope that I've finally managed to get the resolution conflicts to go away at last. I think I've figured it out. Again, it's been a real pain ever since I had my PC repaired to get the recording sort of software back to the presets that I had before, and I think I have finally managed to do it, so I think it should finally be in a format that isn't so blurry. But if it is still blurry, then disregard this whole first bit and we'll just get straight on to the other parts. And I did decide to use a Moria battle, both to try out the hopefully fixed resolution and because there are a few valid points to be made about this battle, and it is rather fun as well to behold. There's a lot of good artillery shots, there's a lot of very grindy choke point battles within the Dwarven Keep or Kingdom, or, well, mines I guess you would call it. I don't know. I'm not as well versed in Lord of the Rings lore as perhaps I should be, but still, as you can tell, I am playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, and it is a very much an Orc onslaught that will be brought to bear on Moria, and I am playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, which is, you know, this is probably the most lore-friendly battle I've done in quite a while, to be honest with you, and I'm bringing several units of heavy goblin infantry. I believe I'm bringing 5 units, or 6 perhaps. I think it is 6 actually. So yeah, I've got a core of heavy goblin infantry. Again, they're very dependable units. They rely a bit on their armour, so against crossbows they're not going to do very well, but against archers they're a surprisingly good unit to use. You know, very good fodder tier unit, although, you know, the orcs are not exactly short on that. And I've got a couple of units of cave trolls. Again, they're slightly cheaper than your standard trolls. So again, my hope here is that the cave trolls can do some of the heavy lifting and smashing through a lot of the choke points that Moria has, and that's going to be the primary subject as we move forward in this battle. I'm also bringing a catapult, of course. I'm also not bringing any range, and there was a purpose behind this. It's not a good idea to not bring any range, but I was hoping that I would be able to showcase why it wasn't a good idea, and fortunately I was able to capture that. But I am bringing some of the Blackwatch Legion, and they are good at soaking up enemy ranged fire as long as it's from archers. Crossbows slightly less so. And then I'm bringing several units of heavy goblin halberds as well. Armour piercing, not quite as long as pikes, but they should serve me well in the choke points that Moria has. Moving on, I also have, back here is really my high tier stuff. The Blackwatch Legion counters that as well, but they don't have quite the same bite as both the Orc bodyguards, which look just like the heavy goblin infantry. I'd kind of like to see these guys updated a bit to make them look a little bit more menacing. And then back here I have the best Misty Mountains unit in my opinion, the Blackback Mountain Berserkers. Not particularly durable in a sort of grindy fight like this, but if I can deploy them against the best enemy units, they will do a lot of damage and pay for themselves very easily. Now the reinforcement army up here, ooh, well, this is not ideal. Here we can see Mordor. Now he was hoping to reinforce me, but there's actually no way to get down to my deployment unless you go right around the other side. So Mordor have deployed up here for no real reason, but they will be able to reinforce the army on the other side. We have several units of Mordor Morannon Uruks, several units of Uruk halberds. Again, the Mordor army this time doesn't have any high tier stuff, it's just a consistent stream of basically mid tier to trash tier stuff, and you can see Morannon Guard, more Uruk halberds and more Morannon Uruks. The best thing he has in his army are these mountain trolls, and he does have a lot of them. He's also got a ram, but he doesn't really need it because, of course, both the first armies will be able to deal with the gates very easily, and then over here he's got the rest of his Morannon Guard, and he's got some heavy maulers as well in this mix, I think, as well. Yep, you can see them with their giant axes. So VRL Patrangel is playing as Mordor, and I am playing as, well no, I'm not playing as, but Steelcan is playing as the Orcs of Gundabad, and he's got a line of Orc fellas. Again, they're going to do good damage, but they're not particularly durable, so they do need to be backed up. Some Snaga Stalkers, they are free, as are all of the lowest tier Orc units. He's also got a catapult. Back here he's got a unit of Trolls of Gundabad, the best trolls on offer, but there are only one, well, the best trolls that we've deployed. And then he's got a lot of pikes, focusing pretty heavy on his pikes. He's got several units of Rudour and several units of Witch Realm pikemen. So here we should be, you know, they will serve you very well in a choke point battle like this, but they won't smash through the lines very quickly unless you deploy them en masse. And then over here we have a couple of units of Rudour Berserkers, very good mid to high tier units, and then back here we have the scariest stuff, the Witch Realm Blackguard and the Witch Realm Hammerguard. So a very scary force of orcs is coming to bear on Moria itself, and then inside we have the alliance of Dale and the dwarves trying to hold against the orc threat. I guess they fell back to Moria after they lost the north and somehow reclaimed it, who knows. You know, it's not perfect, but it is what it is. And then you know, the Dale Force, they're not quite as heavy duty as the Dwarves, but they do have their own little quirks which make them well suited to a choke pointy fight. Dalian Spearmen and Dalian Marksmen, pretty good units for what they are. The Lake Town Infantry is not very heavy duty, but it is cheap, so they are going to be able to deploy them en masse with the Spearmen to hold the line initially. Rivermen are very cheap Javelin tier units, well, Javelin tier, very cheap Javelin units, if I get my words out. Again, these guys, it's a conundrum because they're not really worth sacrificing any units to really go after, but they can do a lot of damage if deployed correctly, so cheap Javelins are still very effective in the right hands. They too have a catapult, and the artillery in this fight for both sides is very, very important, as it will be on a choke pointy map like this. More Dalian Marksmen. Over here we have some Athala Rangers, and then back up here we have some Barding Herd. These guys are very, very effective in a choke point as well, very heavy duty halberdiers. And then back here, to reinforce them, we have these slightly more vulnerable in many ways. They do have hit points, but there are less of them, and they're not really a line unit, but the Dale Swordmasters will provide the damage that a polearm unit cannot. And then if we continue up here, up the ramps, we have several more units of archers with Athala Rangers, and then the Avari Pikemen. Hopefully we'll be able to hold the line. Very good at holding a line, but they do need to be backed up. And then rounding off the Dale army, we have 2 units of dismounted Earls. Again, not a very good unit on the offense, but at holding a line again, combining them with those Avari Pikemen, they will be very difficult to break down short of our very high tier units. And then the other unit, the other army we have is of course the Dwarves. They've retaken Moria, but they don't want to give it back to the Orcs so soon. So played by Botha and Dale, I believe is played by... Let me see if I can remember that. No, actually let's not bother with all that nonsense. Swedish Walrus. I'm terrible at remembering names. So, Botha, he's bringing Ironfoot Spears, lots of Ironfoot Warriors and crossbows as well, and Ironfoot Pikemen, the standard Dwarf core, and then around this he has several units of very, very high tier units indeed. Guards of Khazad-dûm, and Mithril Guard and Sons of Durin, and a catapult of his own. So this is a very, very elite army indeed. And now we shall commence the advance. And obviously I'm going to be deploying my slightly less elite units first, as will they on the other side. You can see that the Mordor player is also going to be having to sort of retreat from the cliffside and go the long way around to reinforce Gundabad, but it doesn't really matter because it's not like we can commit everything all at once anyway, and Gundabad, they do get going first, so we will stay with them. Another little mini announcement is that the test patches are coming thick and fast on the Discord, I should say. And hopefully 0.92 will be out within the near future. Jesus, I'm stumbling over my words quite a lot, but I have been recording quite a lot today, so I hope you can forgive me for that. I'm also rather croaky because of my allergies, but you know, that's something I can't really help. But yes, hopefully 0.92 will be out, and hopefully I'll do a little video just explaining on what's what. There isn't anything brand new coming in, but there are some pretty substantial changes to the existing factions. So the Orc factions, the Elf factions, and Eriador and Umbar. Those are the ones which are getting the bulk of the changes, both nerfs and buffs where needed. So it'll be an interesting thing to talk about because it's very focused. Stuff like the Trolls and the Horse Archers are getting looked at. But for now, we'll focus on the battle at hand, and Moria is a map from vanilla that hasn't really changed, and nor can it change in many ways. Like, WK is going to be revamping all the maps to a point, but Moria, even if Moria is going to be one of the ones to be revamped, it's going to always be choke pointy, and so that won't change even if it does get updated. But primarily, the thing to do here is you have to try and wear them down. You know, this is a 3v2, so obviously as the attackers... Oh, we're stuck in the wall. This is a real problem. The camera's going to do that quite a lot, unfortunately. The attackers are going to have a huge money advantage. Well, not money advantage, but men advantage. So you're going to have to really make your ranged count if you're on the defense, and you're going to have to really hope that your lines hold. Sending in the Trolls first is a bit of a bold move. He's trying to smash through these spearmen and trying to get into these rivermen, which is not a bad idea, but it's not worth wasting a whole unit of Trolls of Gundabad on them. As you can see, the first volley took out the 2 that got through. And spears, they have a decent amount of mass. They're not easy to break through, and if you don't back up your Trolls, they're just going to end up getting slaughtered in melee, even against basic spears like Dale spears. It is worth saying that Trolls are one of the things in 0.92. Well, there goes the announcer butting in on me again. But trolls are one of the things that have been tweaked, or going to be tweaked for 0.92, and I will go through those changes soon, but ultimately the same thing will apply, where if you throw them in on their own, they're just going to get stonewalled and overwhelmed. And again, these orc fellas are coming in a little too late to help the trolls, really. And even when they get in there, the Dalian Spearmen and the Lake Town Infantry are not the most heavily armoured unit, but again, orc fellas are really just sort of basic trash anyway, so it doesn't really matter. They're slightly above the Snaga, of course, because they can actually deal a decent amount of damage. He's also sending in his Rudau Berserkers. Now, this is a bit gung-ho because, well, there goes the gate on my side, but if we... Right, okay, so if we go back over to here, the catapult is moving up, and with such a meaty blob over here, both the javelins, but more worryingly, the catapult is going to have free range on a ton of units, and it's not like this is all garbage either. The Rudau Berserkers are an important unit for Gundabad in this battle because they are armour piercing, they have hit points. Overall a strong unit against the dwarves in particular in the late game if we can save them. As you can see, the catapults, they are winding back, and that is absolutely devastating. The frame rate tanks every time of those catapults, and that is absolutely abysmal. And I've said in the past that pushing with mass is a good thing to do, but it's only a good thing to do if you're sure you can force your way through, and they didn't force their way through the spears, and they were made to pay for it by both the javelins and the catapult. So again, they're going to have to sort of commit their units a little bit more sparingly and wear them down through attrition, and that's going to be, that is another brutal hit. But again, that's the name of the game on Moria. You need to wear them down with attrition, and then when the time comes, you need to commit with everything you have. So if we go back over to my side, where I'm beginning my assault, we can see that the Dwarf Halberdiers, these units, have a little bit out of position, so I decided to charge in immediately with heavy goblin infantry. Now on the other side it's not so easy because of how the bottleneck starts almost immediately, but over here you can see the dwarves also have a catapult. And I didn't bring archers because I wanted to show how enemy skirmishers could be used to brutal effect if you have nothing to respond to them with. However, I also got that in a way I didn't expect with the catapult. I should have expected it really. But the catapult has a very nice shot on me because of this incline. Usually if the enemy catapult has got a good shot on you, what you want to do is bunch as close to the enemy lines as possible, because then that means they increase the likelihood of the catapult getting friendly fire and working for you in a sense. If any of you saw the Rivendell replay, the updated Rivendell replay, you'll know that catapult friendly fire can be devastating indeed. Here we can see, again, more juicy artillery shots, and that's going to be a theme throughout this battle as a whole. Now, you know, if I had even the cheapest archers are enough to really bother a catapult crew, because as units they're not very well defended, and you know they're pretty crap in terms of their armour. But that is, you know, it's bullying really, isn't it? So many crispy orcs on both sides, but again, it's something we can afford because obviously we have 3 armies, they only have 2, so we have the numbers that we can just throw away. Me a little bit less so, because I'm not going to have any reinforcements, whereas Gundabad is going to have the reinforcements from Mordor. More coming in again, and also the heavy goblin infantry. The catapult is being used up here in these early stages against my worst unit, so it's not a total loss, although the catapult is very easily paying for itself as this continues. But yeah, this is why you should always bring cheap archers, even if you think, well, they're pretty crap and they're not really going to get a lot done against a faction like the Dwarves or Dale. It's always worth it to have some sort of range threat, and I'm glad that I was able to demonstrate it in such a severe way. I was thinking that I was going to be up against Dale because of how the players lined up, and I was hoping that I would be on the receiving end of Dale's archers to showcase that, but instead I'm on the receiving end of a dwarven catapult. So again, it's going to be the same case as on the other side. I'm going to have to commit kind of piecemeal for the time being and sort of wear them down, and hopefully their ammo will start to run out. But if we go back over here, the Dale line still holds strong. These orc fellas are routing as well. So the first attack from Gundabad can only be described as disastrous, really. They lost Rudau Berserkers and orc fellas en masse without really getting a lot of return, and not to mention their only troll unit, a very expensive one at that. Fortunately though, the numbers advantage is very, very significant. You know, we can afford to be reckless and honestly not very smart in our play and still not really be punished for it. If the defenders make one mistake, it's basically game over in the long run. But now we have the Mordor player coming in, and the Mordor player, he invested in a lot more sort of low to mid-tier trashy units, and so the idea was that we would send him in first, and he would hopefully wear down the Dale player, because obviously Dale a little bit less prepared for a slog than the dwarves. They are still pretty good at it, but stuff like the Lake Town infantry is not really going to have the endurance of a basic dwarven unit. And the Moria on guard, they're a unit that I really liked in vanilla. It's nice to see them, and it's nice to see them really get into the faces of Dale, and it's nice to have a somewhat lore-friendly matchup for once. Like, usually I'm more of a mechanics-focused guy, but it's nice for once to do something that is, you know, I think Rivendell was the last one which was overall themed, and that was a fun one. But now we're in the Dwarf lands. But yeah, he's also sending in some more on avant-garde, so these spears are not going to really do much in terms of forcing our way through, but they do engage the Dale line, and the attrition will be real. At least that's the hope. The fire arrows of Dale streaking in there. I'm really starting to pile on the pressure with these heavy goblin infantries, and the catapult has stopped. He's trying, I think, to get a better angle, although the angle could scarcely be better. He's basically got a free shot on all of these heavy goblins. And again, these halberds are in the perfect place, pointing uphill with their halberds there, armour piercing and heavy goblin infantry. The whole thing that makes them good is their surprisingly good armour, and it's being almost completely negated by the dwarves. And they are goblins at the end of the day, their melee skill is low. But here we go. The mighty push from the Misty Mountains, although it's more of a dribble at the moment. I'm not eager to sort of commit all my forces knowing that that catapult is there, and also the dwarves always bring crossbows, and I know that they're present. Crossbows as well, they're going to be pretty bad for me to try and take on. He's also got some miners in here though, and miners, while they're armour piercing, they are the trashiest unit the dwarves can field, so they're really just here to give the line a bit more mass. You can see these miners sort of forming a sort of middle ground between these two halberdier units. You can see I'm sending in another unit of heavy goblin infantry, and I'm trying to sort of push my way in. I'm trying to make it so that I've got a very condensed line, really trying to get into the face of these halberds so they can't keep me at arm's length, because the longer they do that, the more I'm going to be bled for no real reason. Again, but forcing your way through the dwarves is always going to be a struggle. And pushing with mass is something that against the dwarves you're going to need a little bit more, maybe on average a unit more than you would expect. Here we can just see the horde of filthy goblins. I have to say though, there is a certain catharsis to sending wave after wave of your own men to die. Maybe that just speaks ill of me, but I'm also trying to force my way through this flank, which is a little bit more vulnerable. There's only a thin line of miners here, and hopefully I can get a bit more of a crescent moon sort of shaped surround off on these halberdiers so they don't have it all their own way. And I'm also sending up halberdiers of my own, because while they may not be as good as the dwarven halberdiers, they're still armour piercing, and I have more of them. So again, hoping to just wear the dwarves down. That's easier said than done, but I do have the numbers to make them think twice before just committing wave after wave of men. The rivermen are now out of ammunition, and so they again are just sort of reinforcing this front line. They're not particularly great in melee, in fact they are absolutely awful, but they will at least add a little bit more survivability. Dale is sending in the fire arrows. They're getting a bit of friendly fire honestly, but that more than makes up for it. The catapult is just brutalising every assault we make on this front, and a unit of 133 Moran on heavy maulers and 90 Moran on guard are sent routing. And Moran on heavy maulers are a very, very effective unit, which we're going to need in the late game. At least they would be very useful in the late game. Again, I would have recommended sending up more halberdiers first of all, to be honest with you, if we're going to try and wear them down, and then when the time is right, you have to strike. But again, you know, they have done a little bit of damage, but they certainly haven't gotten a return yet. And as we can see here, mountain trolls being committed. So trolls, but a lot of troll action here. And interestingly enough, they are able to get into these rivermen and Lake Town infantry, so they will do quite a lot of damage. Obviously, the rivermen and Lake Town infantry, not the most heavy-duty unit. He needs to back these trolls up pretty quickly with some infantry units, though, otherwise they will suffer the same fate as their more heavily armoured cousins. These arrows are streaking in. I'm not sure exactly what they're hitting though, they seem to be missing a lot of shots. Again, there's Moran on heavy maulers in the background, streaking in. Mountain trolls better than cave trolls now, so that is worth saying. They look a little strange with these hoods, they look like executioners' hoods. The same model as the troll catapult crew, but now we have the Moran on heavy maulers. They are back. And I think that was the one that broke, so they did come back pretty quickly. And they will offer more bite, and this line is going to start to feel the effects. And And the catapult for Dale honestly should probably think about retreating because it still has ammunition and it's going to be useful. He's sending in another unit of Lake Town infantry. So this is going to be interesting. He's trying to hold, and I assume that this is going to try and buy time for the catapult to run away because you can see them turning around. It's a good move because these trolls are going to cause enough damage for the Mordor infantry if it's committed a little bit more en masse to really smash through this line. So if we go back to the other front again, caught in the ceiling, I've sent forward a unit of Blackwatch Legion because I noticed I was getting a bit thin on the ground on the front line, and if there's one thing I don't want to do, it's give the dwarves any sort of breathing room. So I need my front line to be a little bit more robust. I'm taking crossbow fire, which is not ideal, but the Blackwatch Legion should still make it so that my position is secured. I've also wrapped around a little bit. There is a bit of a gap here that I can use. And again, I'm sending up, well, those are routing units, but I do have a unit, another unit of halberdiers in reserve. They're pointing the wrong way at the moment. Well, some of them are. How strange. But again, I don't want to commit halberdiers willy-nilly because they are going to be a very useful tool to just sort of engage the dwarves with and not necessarily die quickly like my heavy goblin infantry tends to. The dwarves have got so much armour piercing, of course, that it is very difficult to get a foothold as a faction, which does rely somewhat on their armour. The Misty Mountains are kind of weird in the fact that they are split somewhat between their defensive units and their offensive units. And now's a good time to talk about the Misty Mountains, I suppose. Units like the Blackwatch Legion, of course, and the Heavy Goblin Infantry means they're pretty well placed to deal with archer-heavy factions, particularly factions with lower-tier archers. The elves are still probably pretty dangerous to the orcs of the Misty Mountains, but ultimately they also have units which follow the opposite philosophy, in the sense that the Blackback Berserkers, very, very dangerous, one of the most offensive-focused units in the game, but next to other shock infantry they are a little bit fragile. So again, I think the Misty Mountains do get a lot of stick. I think a lot of people consider them to be the weakest orc faction alongside Isengard, but I actually don't agree. I think that the Misty Mountains orcs are, you know, they can hold their own against Mordor and Gundabad in the current build, I think. I think that units like the Blackwatch Legion and the Blackback Berserkers give them a sort of dimension that those two don't have as such. Like, as Mordor, you always know what to expect. They're just going to come at you. Like, in a 1v1, say, Mordor are always just going to come at you. And Gundabad are always going to have a quality core. But the Misty Mountains are a little bit more unpredictable, and I like that. I like the fact that they've got a few quirky options. Now these heavy goblin infantry are getting shot in the side by crossbows, so my flanking force here trying to get into the sides of these halberds again is not working, and they are about to be surrounded by a unit of miners. Again, miners not the best thing, but they are armour piercing, so again the dwarves rely on armour and they know how to deal with it themselves. If we go back over to the other side again, we get caught in the ceiling. These Lake Town infantry are still holding bravely. The Dale catapult is now far away, so they've done their job. The brave men of Lake Town, but they really aren't designed to take on orcs with axes of this calibre, and they will fall away pretty quickly. But this first defence from Dale was very, very efficient. I mean, just look at the bodies. These are like 3 to 4 orcs deep, and some of those are Rudau berserkers, some of those are trolls. It's been a very efficient defence so far from Dale, but again, it needs to be, because they're up against 2 armies, and honestly the dwarves probably would have been better off facing 2 armies than 1. And Dale, you know, again, Misty Mountains, pretty good at dealing with archers. That's to a point, so it's hard to say, but in the end it doesn't matter. This is how they've deployed. Dale having to take on the numbers. Mordor with their Moranon, heavy maulers. Again, the axes, the serrated axes do look a little bit strange, I admit, but the other ones look, you know, they look, if not reasonable, then they look like the sort of weird weapons that orcs would use. More for intimidation than effectiveness. After all, no one cares if an orc dies on the field. These Lake Town infantry, they're holding for quite a long time against the unit which is much more suited for this battle than they are. So if we go back over to the other side, the grind continues. This is the sort of battle you can always expect on Moria. A battle of attrition. And it's this sort of battle of attrition which the orcs and the dwarves do quite well in, and Dale, really, to a point. Maybe a little less so, but all of these factions do well in a grind, and that was the first bit of friendly fire their catapults got, but their catapult has more than paid for itself already. They've also got some hits on my Blackwatch Legion, but the Legion is providing that front line, which I did need. I couldn't keep sending up heavy goblins to the slaughter alone without a bit more heavy-duty backup. Oof. It's so brutal. Mercy. If we look over here, these miners have done their job very well. They're impetuous, they're warmed up, ready for battle. But again, if we look back here, the waves never end. Another unit of heavy goblin infantry coming in to reclaim Moria after the dwarfs reclaimed it from them.
Only half our force remains.
And the catapult just firing in continuously. A unit of 92 heavy goblin halberds are routing. That's not a good sight, leaving the Blackwatch Legion on their own in melee with some heavy goblin infantry who are now also routing. Again, morale is a real issue. The Misty Mountains and Gundabad, I believe, have the worst morale in the game between them, certainly with their lower tier units. Anyway, obviously higher tier units is a little bit different. But these heavy goblins getting into these miners, preventing a flanking charge into the Blackwatch Legion, and the dwarven miners have taken damage to the point where the heavy goblins should be able to deal with them pretty efficiently in melee now. They don't have the melee skills to deal with a torrent of orcs of this size. And I'm also sending up, well, some of those heavy goblin halberds are routing, but some of them aren't. Sending forward another whole unit. It's a very disheartening sight when you're up against the orcs and they just keep sending forward more and more men. Individually they are garbage, but together they are intimidating. There are the Blackwatch Legion, certainly one of the more unique units in the game with their big tower shields. Again, their attack score is pretty garbage, but I think they are armor piercing, so that little attack score they have is effective against most everything. And of course, archers, it's really just, I liked the analogy that someone on the Discord used about this sort of unit. They are a tar pit for arrows. It's just such a waste to fire your arrows into them usually. There are a few exceptions, but not many. As we can see here, Mordor and Gundabad both did bring some lower tier archers to try and deal with the enemy, but this is the problem that you also have even if you do bring them. Dale just mowing them down with the Athala Rangers and the Dalian Marksmen, although it is a bit of a waste. You know, they are orc archers after all, but again, going after this catapult is the important thing, and that's the benefit of bringing even low tier garbage archers. It means you can at least have some sort of response in the chamber for enemy artillery, which I didn't have. I was hoping it would be against enemy skirmishers rather than enemy artillery, but I guess I was rather naive in thinking that. So in trying to showcase something, I myself was taught a lesson. There's a sobering thought. Now, back over on my front, things are progressing as they will, but we are now starting to push the dwarves back. It was very costly, of course. Not quite as costly as on the other side. You can see my trolls in the background there, just waiting, biding their time, waiting for an opening. Because again, once you decide to really push, really commit, you need to go with everything. And I'm not quite ready to do that. I need to force them back. As soon as I have them on this side of the bridge of Khazad-dûm, that is when I will make my push and try and make it stick. But as it is, the grind is suiting me now. These Ironfoot halberds have held for a long time though. And while they may be one of the cheaper dwarven units, they really are one of the... I would really recommend the dwarven halberds the vast majority of the time. You can't go far wrong with them. At this point in time in the meta of the game, I would say halberds are much superior to pikes. You know, in the vast majority of cases. I mean, pikes still have their place, of course, but I think that halberds overall, with that armor piercing, and they're often, you know, they do tend to have sort of the higher tier, slightly higher tier. Like a lot of pikes tend to be quite low tier, with a few notable exceptions. Again, these Blackwatch Legion providing a bit more of a meaty core to these halberdiers, and over here, these miners, they aren't fighting men, and up against these goblins, they are being slaughtered now. But the dwarf player has done very well as well, I would say. He's certainly killed more of my men than I would have liked, and mostly down to the catapult, of course. And if we look here, we are at the moment 7% behind, so it's not quite as bad as it might seem, to be honest with you. But again, if we look here, committing your men piecemeal like this, these Uruk halberds, and we can see here some crispy, those look like Uruk halberds as well. And there might be some, yeah, there's some heavy maulers on the ground there as well. Committing them piecemeal like this is a waste. Even if they're depleted units, their mass can still be useful in the push. And this moment here, even in spite of the catapult fire, like if you want to skirmish down the catapult a bit more, that's fine. But as soon as you push up to engage these barding herd, it should be a push en masse. You should be committing a lot of men, and you should be trying to force them back for good. Again, the Barding Herd are pretty well armoured, so they will stand up to low tier archers. You know, maybe not as well as some other units, but they will still at least not fold. Now there's a unit of Dalian marksmen who's running around like they're running around like madmen out here. They're going to get slaughtered if they're not careful. They're taking a good amount of archer fire, a bit of friendly fire from their own catapult, and they're going to get surrounded pretty soon. Bit of a waste by the enemy as well, to be honest with you, so both are being a bit wasteful with some of their units here, because again, these Dalian marksmen, they may be archers, but they can still be used to prop up the line and really hold the enemy back, and they're being kind of wasted here. I don't know what they want to do. I mean, they're trying to get into these archers, I guess, these goblin trackers and these Snarger stalkers, but it's not worth it. These archers are so garbage that your archers are going to be able to return fire on them. It's about deciding what is worth it and what isn't, and this isn't really worth it. Like, victory seems certain, sure, but what are they going to kill? Snarger? Like, they're going to die eventually, and it's much more important if you hold this line. This line is going to be key for the defenders. How long can they hold here? The Barding Herd providing the meat, and back here we can see several units, like these Dalian marksmen as well. Again, they're being sent forward, and with their axes they could be invaluable against some of the Gundabad high tier units, just because they can chip away at them. They're being kind of wasted here, but again, it kind of balances out because the attackers are also sending forward individual little units which are just getting slaughtered without doing any damage at all, so 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, as they say. These Uruk halberds are about to get surrounded. I do like the looks of these new Dalian units. I like their shields, and I like the colour scheme. They don't look the most heavily armoured units in the world though, which means attrition is not going to be their friend, and Moria is a battle of attrition. We see here there's just tons and tons of Snarger committing their lower tier units, which is probably a good move because, you know, the Dale player is using their archers in return, so it is worth it. And if this catapult crew, this is the important thing, the catapult crew is being worn down. You can see these low tier archers, the goblin trackers, and the orc archers paying for themselves alone. I like the fact that some of them are like carrying little sacks as backpacks. These little individual details. If we go back over to my front, however, with their backs to the abyss, these dwarven halberdiers are attempting to hold, but the Blackwatch Legion and the heavy goblin halberds are just pushing them ever closer to the edge. They refuse to jump to their doom. They will fight to the last. But yes, I'm slowly securing myself over here. These Blackwatch Legion, they did actually get hit by a catapult, which is rather heartbreaking. They were a unit of 150 and now they're a unit of nearly 100. So again, the catapult really paying for itself there, and I did move up a unit over here of halberds at the front with infantry to back them up. I'm not going to attack over here though, because it would be suicide with Ironfoot axe throwers, but I just don't want the enemy to counter-attack into me. If you look at that, that's cool. The dwarf shield wall with the Ironfoot spears. But yeah, this is more of a countermeasure to make sure they don't counter-attack into me. And heavy goblin halberds in spear wall, they're not the fastest thing to break down, especially not when they've got a unit ready to reinforce them, even if they're tired. It's just a case of me wanting to use the bulk of my forces in a linear attack straight to the town centre. None of this ancillary fucking about. If we look over here though, look at these Ironfoot halberds, they're such a heavy duty unit. There's nothing lightweight about dwarves, and the Ironfoot units in general, if it's got Ironfoot in front of it, generally speaking they're very, very good value for money. With the possible exception of the Ironfoot Guard, where you can't really justify picking them over the Erebor infantry. But other than that, I have to say, the Ironfoot warriors, they're here en masse. The Blackwatch Legion though, I'm going to push them back. And I'm nearly ready to make my assault over the bridge of Khazad-dûm. But if we go back over to the other front line, stuck in the cliffs, and here we go. So the Snarger have managed to surround the Dalian marksmen again, so it's a bit of a waste from these troops that could have been used to reinforce the line. Ultimately, they're being sort of trapped by Snarger and slowly picked off by units like Moran on guard. And these axes, pretty wasted on these units, would have been much more worth it against some of the more heavily armoured units, although Uruk halberds, I believe they do have a bit of armour, so hopefully the bonus can be conferred to them. Standard Uruk halberds as opposed to the Moranon units, although there is going to be a few tweaks to that sort of thing in the patch, which hopefully I will be able to talk about in the next video. But again, halberds, not the quickest at getting their kills, but they are reliable. Keeping the enemy at arm's length, of course. These archers are firing in. How's the catapult doing? Well, not all that well. But he is deploying now the Athala Rangers, although they look like they're out of ammo with these swords. So again, if they've already deployed their ammunition, there's not much you can do. Meanwhile, if we go back over to here, you can see there's one dwarf left on the bridge, taking on the Blackwatch Legion. I could make a you shall not pass reference, but I'm not going to put too much gusto into that because I can hear the groans from here. Meanwhile, if we look over here, there's just a few halberds and they've been forced over to the side somewhat. So yeah, if we look back over here, you can see over here on the mini-map, I've also got my catapult now shooting. And as you can see, well, as you can hear, it managed to get a decent hit. I managed to destroy an enemy catapult. I've killed a few Ironfoot spears. I've also killed some pikemen. So again, it's not quite the same level as they were able to inflict on us, but again, we can afford to take losses. They can't really, so he is retreating back behind there. Oof. Another catapult gone. And a square hit into these Ironfoot warriors. And I'm not even using flaming shots, so the spread wasn't quite as thick. But again, as you can see, those two troll units, I clicked on them to sort of go over here, but because of the pathfinding on Moria, they decided that the best way was to go all the way around and then try and go in from the other side, which is madness. But again, that's just the nature of this game. The pathfinding is a little bit weird sometimes, especially on these maps which haven't been revamped. Here we can see though the Blackwatch Legion, we're just forcing them out, so we've squeezed them. And at this point, things are going well for me. Well, things are going as well as they can for me. Again though, over here they're just sending up individual units. They need to push. If they're going to choose to engage these Barding Herd, it needs to be with everything. Like, early on they got punished for trying to engage with everything, but now is the time. It's about trying to sort of pick your moments and decide when your push is going to be most effective, and it would be now, because, you know, ultimately they're looking a bit thin on the ground back here. I mean, yes, they've got the Sword Masters, but if they pushed with everything, they would probably draw some of the dwarves to reinforce them, and then they're going to be looking a little bit lighter on my front. So again, it's all relative. Yes, we have the reserves that we can afford to throw men like this away, but, you know, if you can help it, you don't want to. You want to really make a concerted push, and especially seeing as he's not in guard mode, it would be easy to pull him out of position. But again, there's not enough reinforcements back here. The armies are not formed up. There are goblin trackers, but most of the armies are still outside the gates, and that's going to cost us in the end, I fear. Meanwhile, just in time to see the Blackwatch Legion, and you can see the trolls cresting the hill in the background over there. These Ironfoot warriors, though, dwarves are sturdy and they will hold. The clash of the shielded units, indeed. Although the Blackwatch Legion have shields which any dwarf would, you know, be happy to use, those giant tower shields. Although maybe not. I guess the dwarves would really struggle to use a tower shield. And the trolls, forcing their way through the Blackwatch Legion, they're going to try and force their way into these crossbows that are behind. Got the other trolls in reserve over there. Again, the cave trolls, not actually as good as they used to be. The mountain trolls are now better than them, but I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for those ridiculous looking, like, they look like concrete cinder blocks on sticks. Not quite as ridiculous as the snow troll weaponry, but there is a certain charm to the giant hammers that the cave trolls use. And of course, being the cheapest trolls means they're the easiest to field. Most trolls are pretty damn expensive, but the cave trolls are very reasonable. And again, oof, getting clonked over the head with a giant mallet. Again, the Blackwatch Legion providing the secure position, and the cave trolls providing a bit of punch. And then over here, these heavy goblin halberds were victorious, wiping out the last of the Ironfoots, so they are going to follow the cave trolls in and hopefully reinforce the position nicely. Meanwhile, over here, we can see that this assault is just being thrown off time and time again. There's a lot of orc archers though now, a lot of arrows coming in. But again, the Barding Herd will stand up to them because of that ammo. More Dalian marksmen being thrown in. These orc fellas, they're eager despite only being in a unit 58. Piecemeal engagements like this don't tend to work. At least not in this situation. Again, I'm contradicting myself from earlier where I said that, you know, you want to engage piecemeal. But now is the time. If we look back here, are they sending in more men? Not really. Again, all their units are very nice and organised. These Witch Realm pikes, Rudar pikes, all of those Mordor units in their columns, Now Mordor is deploying again, just one, well, 2 units I guess, plus a catapult. But commit everything. I mean, Mordor went into this battle with the garbage army, just send them forward. And then once they're past this initial position, let Gundabad assault the town centre with everything they have. But as it is, it's a slow, slow grind. If we go back over to my side, I've probably made a few more inroads, at least relatively speaking. But again, I have less reserves, so the chances of all these losses coming back to bite me is a little bit more likely. Meanwhile, these Blackwatch Legion, thanks to the Trolls have largely been expended, but it has meant that the Blackwatch Legion had a hole that they could force their way through, and the catapult is now out of ammunition. So they are now in melee against Blackwatch Legion, they don't stand a chance. And seeing that there is a bit more of an extreme hole, I'm just going to deploy my other unit of Cave Trolls to try and really make this stick. These halberds have tried to reinforce the position. They aren't really in the best position to use their halberds, but again, just making sure they can't push us back to the bridge. Because again, a choke point suits the dwarves more than it suits us. I want to deploy my numbers a little bit more effectively. These Cave Trolls. Ironfoot Warriors, well, victory is a distinct possibility against these halberds, but again, victory is a distinct possibility for them, so I'm not sure the game knows what to make of it. My Orc bodyguards are in the background over there. But these Cave Trolls, the catapult crew is not really going to know how to deal with them, and the Ironfoot Warriors will do a better job, but they're a little bit too spread out, and with the help of the Blackwatch Legion, we should do very well for ourselves over here. So we have managed to take the bridge, and it's important that we make that stick. As you can see, I'm also moving over those heavy goblins in the background to get ready to reinforce over here, because I don't really want to commit my Orc bodyguard just yet. I'd rather commit standard infantry if I can at all help it. If we look back over here, again, the Dalian player is doing a very good job at holding the Orcs at arm's length. These Orc Marauders were sent in. I missed those in the army composition. Again, they're armour piercing as well. It is the garbage kind of armour piercing where their base attack is so low it doesn't really matter, but again, it's a nice little touch. These Orc Marauders getting into the face of these Dalian marksmen, trying to deal with them. The Barding Herd are not in position though. They're not really in the best position. If they attacked, like I know the catapult is in commission, but if you got up into the face of these Barding Herd, it wouldn't matter. Again, boldness and aggression, it works, I promise you. It's counterintuitive to charge into such dangers, but when you're the Orcs, it is the future. It is the way to go. But if we look back over here, you know, Athala Rangers, it's not really the most intimidating thing to be facing in melee. You know, they're lightweight, they've got a decent amount of skill, but they're not exactly very durable. These, you know, the Dale Swordmasters admittedly are pretty damn good. Their Zweihanders are going to cut through quite a lot of things, but there are only so many of them. And they are as vulnerable to attrition as any unit, any individual unit anyway. These Barding Herd, they've had it pretty easy up to this point, to be honest with you, with their sort of crosses between halberds and glaives. I guess a sort of jumbo Bardiche axe, or Bardiche axe is what you would call that. Again, a unit of Orc fellas rousing into the Barding Herd. Oh dear. Orcs really are brainless. Meanwhile, let's head back over to here. Over to the bridge, we can see here I've committed my heavy goblin infantry, just making sure they can't push me back across the bridge. Because as we can see, the Cave Trolls and the Blackwatch Legion, well, they're starting to feel the effects. I need to get more men through these sort of the pockets of dwarf resistance if I'm going to be able to make this attack stick, at least in an effective sense. You can see these spears, and there goes the artillery shots. I'm trying to get some revenge for earlier. Glancing blows at best, but again, if I can just whittle down the dwarves, they're going to feel it more than I am. Particularly with these trolls right here. Spears, you know, not the highest base damage, but they will hold. And that's what the dwarves need. Again, a bit of friendly fire there, killing 2 of my own trolls. So not really worth it, but again, you can't control what your artillery does. Sometimes it has a mind of its own. We really get up into the face of this fight. The halberdiers. Again, these sort of crummy, homemade halberdiers of the dwarves just thrown together from whatever they can make against the finest arms the dwarves can muster. Quantity versus quality is a phrase I've coined a lot, and it couldn't be more apparent in this matchup. Pokey pokey from the halberdiers. Again, they're kind of pushing me back to the bridge here, which is really not what I want. The Blackwatch Legionnaires are still in combat, but there aren't very many of them. There aren't very many trolls. So I'm going to need to send up my general in a moment to sort of keep order in the ranks. Oof, God, I'm in the abyss. And again, they're sending up units, but they're not sending up enough. I need to send up more. Look at this. There's gaps in their line and everything. It's just too juicy of a target. Where's the pressure? This is the name of the game when you're playing as Mordor and Gundabad. Charge. Even Dale's halberds will not, you know, well, I was going to say they won't bite, but they will. But they won't bite hard enough, is my point. I do like the look of the Barding Herd, though. I like their weaponry. It's quite unique. It's an interesting looking halberd. Again, this is a pretty intimidating front line, I won't lie, but again, like, Uruk archers, like, it's not worth sending them to their deaths like this. They're not going to do anything. If you sent them up with units that actually can hold their own, then yes, they would be an effective meat shield and health sponge for those units, but not like this. And they are going to get butchered. And the amount of kills that Dale is racking up here, Swedish Walrus must be very happy with how his army has performed. Again, the only misstep he's really made was charging out those Dalian marksmen for no real reason. The Gundabad catapult was in position, but it doesn't really have the best of shots. Again, you can try and hit these sword masters, but is it really worth it? And now over here you can see I've committed my Orc bodyguard, and this will cement my position. The Orc bodyguard may look the same as the heavy goblin infantry, but it's an entirely different unit. It's got decent stats, it's got 2 hit points, thick armour. You know, again, I think that they should have a little bit of a unit model update just to show that they are not the crap that their heavy goblin infantry cousins are. But still, you know, this will really reinforce my position. There's no armour piercing around here either, at least there's not a lot of it. You know, the heavy goblin crossbows and the Ironfoot warriors are, but there aren't enough of them to really cause a huge amount of damage. There's still a few trolls as well here and there. Still a few Blackwatch legionnaires as well. See here, there's 3 of them. So they've done well. And I'm slowly pushing them forward, and they have another unit of Ironfoot warriors and a unit of Ironfoot pikemen, and that's all they have in reserve here. And failing that, then it's really back to the town centre where they've got their guards of Khazad-dûm and all their really scary stuff. But again, I've got my blackbacks waiting in reserve back there near my catapult for them. You can see here the spears doing their best to hold, but against such numbers they're going to struggle. Again, the dwarves are much better placed than most factions to deal with this. They are the ultimate defenders. But even they will struggle, even they fall off the cliff. The metaphorical cliff anyway, not the very real one that's over here. It would be cool if they could like sort of animate where if you got pushed back you would fall off the cliff, but I think that would make this bridge just death. Like, it wouldn't make it a particularly viable strategy to defend or attack the bridge. It would be a very weird game of cat and mouse on it, so maybe it's for the best they don't fall off the edge. Ironfoot warriors, again, there's 140 of them, but defeat seems certain. There's just so many goblins. Again, the halberdiers are still there, the regular infantry, the Orc bodyguard, and still a few trolls and a few individual Blackwatch legionnaires. But if we look over here, there's a problem. The axe throwers are getting in position. They're going to try and throw their axes into my halberdiers, and this is bad news because the halberdiers are now the only thing I have holding this front line, and I can't afford for them to just be mown down by axe throwers. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, again, I don't really have much of a choice other than to attack them, seeing that they are doing this. But yes, they are indeed attacking you, so I have to move forward because otherwise they're just going to get butchered, and then the way will be clear for a flanking force of spears and pikes, which again isn't the most biting of attack forces, but it is an annoyance. It means I won't be able to assist my allies when it comes to the assault on the town centre. And attacking through a single choke point against the dwarf's best infantry, we may as well surrender. So again, my army has taken the most in terms of casualties, but I'm still performing the role that I need to. I need to occupy the dwarves and I need to whittle their army down. Because Dale will eventually fall under the weight of 2 armies. So myself and Dale are really playing the get as many kills as we can game before we fall. And then it will be up to the dwarves and Mordor and Gundabad to really fight it out in the end. Again, I'm pulling back my halberds now, the axe throwers are back. And I'm going to form up spear wall, and with these spears in the way, the axe throwers won't actually be able to get their axes off. So again, I can form up my defensive line, and the halberdiers will hold against the spears. It will just that battle will just go on and on and on. Ironfoot warriors, they're being overwhelmed now. They're slowly being surrounded. That crescent moon surround is always what you want to see when you're on the attack. halberds in the background there idle. But you know, they need a bit of a rest. I mean, this unit of halberdiers has been in combat against dwarven halberds, and then they went across the bridge. They've served me well. They've served me very well, in fact. Oof. And over here we can see my catapult is finally in action, getting some nice juicy hits on these Ironfoot spearmen. Crispy dwarves to add to the crispy orcs. The artillery's had a field day, and it's not often actually. Most of the time artillery actually doesn't pay for itself too easily, because it is very expensive, but here it certainly has. And now, finally we have a concerted push. They're engaging the whole line, and they're engaging it with Moranon Uruks, which is, again, it would be better to engage it with Moranon halberds, or even pikes, but ultimately, you know, it's just enough that they're engaging the line and committing some man. Again, these are Thala Rangers. They won't do too well in a very grindy fight like this, but they will at least add some mass to the line. And over here we can see the dwarves have sent some reinforcements in the shape of the Ironfoot Guard. And again, they've got hit points and they're very defensive. They're one of the few dwarven units that are not armour piercing though, with their regular swords. But even so, the dwarves are still, you know, they're going to hold, is the point. Again, we can see that the orcs are now really starting to form up. Got a lot of Uruk halberds back here again. Send them in. The armour piercing that they provide will be very, very welcome on the front line. And we can see over here some pikemen as well. Not armour piercing, but you know, they will. The poke is real. The rise of the pikemen. The pikes will rise again. And over here we can see. Speaking of which, the Ironfoot pikemen have been committed, but again, this isn't really the best fight for them. It might have been better. They might have been better off, honestly, just deploying in front of this hill and forming another pike line for me to go through. But instead, they have been committed, and they will ultimately be surrounded and slowly chopped up. Orc bodyguards. There are still Ironfoot warriors in this mess, but the Orc bodyguards, halberdiers, and heavy goblin infantry, they will do the job. There's simply too many of them, and the pikes can't really get in good formation. And downhill like this, the pikes do suffer a malus, which is something I guess not a lot of people really consider. You know, it does make sense. The pikes, they don't fight too well downhill. But that is something that exists. Here we can see my catapult firing in, and unfortunately getting a ton of friendly fire. Let's go up and have a look. Ugh, heartbreaking. Particularly when these heavy goblin halberds were actually beating these Ironfoot spears pretty handily. Now though, those losses may well hurt them in the long run. They are doing the. I like that though. I like the halberd and pike formations. They will hold. Going back over to the other side. Halberds being committed to the front line, and this is what I like to see. A nice concerted push with survivable and attack-minded units. These are Thala Rangers. Again, victory does seem certain for them, but the attrition will bite them eventually. Same with these Barding Herd. The Barding Herd are nice and bloodied up. They took a lot of arrow, well, they took quite a lot of arrow fire. But, you know, it was low tier archers and they are pretty heavily armoured, so they're still in good enough shape to fight. Especially when they've got their dwarven allies behind them, ready to reinforce. We just see a dead dude there. One of the catapult crew, poor guy. He was not a fighting man. Again, we can see here that the Gundabad catapult trying to get in position, I guess, to get a few close range volleys, but it's not really going to be worth it in the end. You can see those pikes moving up. Moranon Uruks. What else have they got back here, I wonder? Sending up some more Uruk halberds. There's some more Witch Realm pikes. More Orc fellas. Some Rudau pikes as well. I do like the look of the Rudau pikes. Rudau will eventually be separated off into their own faction. Whether they be called Rudau or Angmar, it's not really too important. But that will be neat to see. Rudau finally getting there. And again, I don't think that Gundabad really need the Rudau units. You know, they've got so many options as it is. Here we see, though, that I have finally broken through. I'm not going to attack the town centre yet, of course, because it's very much a good idea to wait until my ally is assaulting from the other side and we can really put the squeeze on them. So my army, at least the dangerous part of my army, is going to be idle here, waiting for the call. Waiting for the call to attack. Back over here. My catapult is, I think, out of ammo, at least mostly. Meanwhile, back over here, my halberds, despite the fact they took friendly fire, still doing an admirable job fighting off against these dwarves. Halberdiers, man. Would recommend. Definitely one of my favourite unit types in the current build. I can't speak of 0.92 though. Again, I know what the changes are, so, you know, we'll see. I'll talk through that in the next video in a bit more detail rather than just sort of mentioning it here, because it deserves its own talking through, I think. But these orcs, well, goblins I should say, doing me proud. Early on I was losing orcs by the dozen in quick succession, but now they're paying for themselves. Look over there. You can see the scariest of my units. Well, my heavy goblin infantry is sort of marching back, and I'm going to reinforce the halberds. You can see here my black backs. They're going to form up behind my orc bodyguard and my heavy goblin halberds. But really the main event is now over on this side, and now is the time. I've been saying this over and over again, but now you want to commit. You want to use your mass and you just want to force through, because continuing to fight them in a line like this is playing into their strengths, and our strengths are our numbers and our weight, and we want to just force our way through. However, it doesn't look like we're too eager on doing that. These Athala Rangers have gotten a bit over eager though, and they will be chopped up. These archers though, well actually no, I believe they're crossbowmen. Yes they are, Ironfoot crossbows, and they've got the perfect firing position. But again, it's not really on the best units, like Mordor, Moranon units and Uruk halberds. They would have been much better off waiting for something like the Witch Realm hammers, or Blackguard, or even the Rudal berserkers, something that's got some real bite and some real survivability to it for the late game to really target. Again, getting these nice close-ups of the grind. And again, Moria, it's a map which is not to everyone's taste, because it is essentially very long choke points, like choke point battle after choke point battle, but it fits the dwarves if you think about it. The dwarves, I should say. And, you know, at the end of the day, it is quite interesting to fight a battle like this sometimes. And it showcases the different strengths, the strength of the quality of Dale and the dwarves against the sheer numbers and weight of Mordor and their orc allies. With their natty armour, but their ranks that seem to extend as far as the eye can see. Again, those Ironfoot Guard are going to be difficult to break down, but with mass we could do it. There are still Dale sword masses in the background though, which is somewhat concerning. Meanwhile, if we go back over to this hill, the Ironfoot spears and the heavy goblin halberds continue to just grind themselves against one another. This fight is not really suiting either army at this point, because I'm going to need some numbers to assault the town centre, but they're going to need numbers full stop. As we can see back here, I'm trying to send over some relief for the halberds in the shape of this exhausted and rather battered heavy goblin infantry, but it's really all I can send over to spare. So this is what they're getting, and they'll like it. Let's go back over here, and we can actually pass through the town centre and see what they have left, the enemy. So they've got some Ironfoot pikes, they also have some Mithril Guard, Avari pikes, dismounted earls again, Guards of Khazad-dûm, more Avari Elder pikemen, so they've got very, very elite forces indeed. And then their Sons of Durin are over here, again just waiting on this hill, I guess just hoping that the enemy don't push through. What's this we got over here? Oh, it's a little torch, or a sconce.
Like this, we will smash the enemy.
The announcer has been singing our praises this whole battle, but if we look at the percentages killed, well, the enemy is still ahead of us. It is only 6%, you know, and the defenders do tend to start losing the more the battle goes on, but even so. If we look over here, the Ironfoot crossbows, the Dale Swordmasters are actually pulling back, so they are thinking of abandoning this position, and that alone is the signal you need. It's the signal you need to commit everything, and these Witch Realm pikemen are moving up again. I think they got shot before actually and retreated, but now's the time to commit them, because the pikes will really give you that extra bit of pokey, and they will force back the enemy front line, and that is exactly the sort of thing you need in this situation. They don't seem eager to do it. The Barding Herd are, you know, they're there. The halberdiers with their overhead slams on these Ironfoot Guard. The Ironfoot Guard are getting bloodied up, and now the pikes are being committed. That's what I like to see.
Victory will be ours.
In vanilla, it was a very common sight to see ranks of pikemen in formation. Now a little less so, because I think pikes have lost their effectiveness a little bit. I think it's a little too easy to push through them. But in this sort of situation, they still have their uses. And the Witch Realm units in particular look pretty cool. The Blackwatch Legion actually do share the same armour as them, except the Witch Realm units obviously lack the skulls and the giant shields. Pikes down. Force through, man. Let's go back over to here, shall we? You can see the Ironfoot axe throwers in position, ready to... Well, they can't actually hit my Ironfoot spears yet. And again, trying to get some hits off, because even though they are a range unit and doing this doesn't expend their ammo, at the end of the day they are going to be committed to melee eventually, and I just want to reduce the dwarven melee strength somewhat. Particularly if they're going up against this exhausted units of halberds, which victory now seems certain. Heavy Goblin halberds, they did me well in this battle. Win or lose, they didn't do me wrong. That infantry is waiting in reserve because I can see the axe throwers, but really, this is where the event is. And to be honest with you, I think we can fast forward it, because this is where the... Well, actually, I won't do it to times 6, that's a bit extreme, but times 2. We can see that the pikemen aren't really in melee. They're sort of, kind of, in places, but they need to commit the other unit of pikes, I think, and they need to commit more. More men. More mass. And as we can see, the front line is just a grind. The Ironfoot crossbows are also being committed now. The battle is very much in our favour. The announcer is very confident of our chances, but, anything can happen. I mean, we took such heavy losses early on, and that may be significant in the late game. Destroying that catapult that's out of ammo, not really worth it. Again, we're not really getting anywhere, if you notice. The line isn't moving. The Gundabad catapult is getting dangerously close to the enemy lines, which, they could force us back, yeah. That's only one unit of pikemen they've got there. They need to send in more. And you can see in those Mordor Moran on Uruks and some halberdiers. Mordor Moran on halberds, that's a unit you definitely need in the melee. The armour piercing, and they're slightly better than their standard Uruk cousins. But still the grind goes on. We're getting a little bit closer. The Barding herd have held well, considering they were under arrow fire early on. But they are starting to lose out. There are now only 50 of them. So the attrition is real. But again, if you find yourself in this situation as the attackers, I cannot stress enough the need for you to attack. Just do it. It's the way to go, trust me. There's no benefit to you sitting back when you have the advantage. Now that's a pretty good hit. Again, nice hit. The enemy are actually trying to force their way into the pikes. They see that it's only pikemen here, and if you force your way into the ranks of pikes, they start to fall. So you need to commit more men. And eventually, I'm just waiting for the moment when Mordor commits all those halberds and remaining Uruks. And here they go. This should be it. This should be the event which leads to this front line's downfall. It has been a brutal fight, but this should be the final nail in the coffin. But the Dale player should be very proud of the defence that he's led here. Admittedly, he was... Well, the attackers did him a favour by pushing with mass when it wasn't appropriate and then not doing so when it was. So, the attackers haven't completely ballsed it up. I'm not saying that it's, oh man, they're terrible. But it is something worth noting for the future. The Ironfoot Guard are still in here. They will still be difficult to break down, but again, in the face of such numbers, it's not going to work. And again, you can see the Rudauer pikes are coming in. Again, this is what I like to see more. Just commit everything. Force your way through this rabble. And the Rudauer pikes, they're the only pikes to have shields, which means they get around at least somewhat the weakness to arrows that all pikes have. At least I assume they do. I mean, I can't imagine that the shield is just there for show and that it's just part of their model, because the shields do matter, they do have a value. So against archers, Rudauer pikes. So if you're up against the elves and you want to bring pikes as Gundabad, don't bring the Witch Realm pikes, bring the Rudauer pikes, at least while the Rudauer pikes are a part of Gundabad, of course, and not a part of Rudauer. So forcing their way through this front line. It's going to be key. Let's go back down to 1 speed and go back over to this little flanking force. As we can see, the Ironfoot axe throwers have charged in, and this has led to a bit of a catastrophic turn in fortunes for me over on this flank. Because as we can see, I did sort of wedge my catapult in here because it was out of ammo, and I just wanted a bit of cover against the axe throwers, but they were out of ammo, so it didn't really matter anyway. So my catapult crew is in melee, but not that that's actually going to do anything too effective in melee. But the halberds are still fighting. There are only 57 of them, but they have held. The Ironfoot Spears, only 14 of them, so they've really ground themselves against one another. An honourable confrontation indeed, but really the problem is this. The guards of Khazad-dûm are trying to flank around, and I think the dwarves see that if it's just down to a battle in the town centre, they're going to find themselves overwhelmed, and the fact that there is still a catapult with ammo in it on our side is going to be disastrous. So they want to flank around and they want to destroy me, so they only have to focus on one choke point. Very sound tactics. I think the dwarven player has had a good idea of what he wanted to do all throughout this map, but in order to try and stop him flanking around with the guards, I have got a unit of blackbacks in reserve, so if he does commit them early, I'll charge my blackback berserkers in, and I'm also pulling back this unit of depleted halberds to also help that front line as well. So that means my attacking force on this side is only going to be made up of orc bodyguards and one blackback berserker, and of course this hero over here, this one Blackwatch Legionnaire with his mighty tower shield and his short sword, I guess, or his barbed short sword. So that's going to be my attack, but ultimately that should be enough against dismounted Earls and Avari pikes. If the dwarves were committing more men over towards this front, like if they moved their Mithril Guard over here, it would be a different story, but regardless of what happens, I need to attack this front when my allies mount their assault. Speaking of which, if we look over here now, you can see Barding Herd that are routing. Just look at how thin this line is. The pikes and halberds have paid dividends on the dwarves. All of the Dale players' forces have now fled the scene. They're running back to the town centre. The dwarves will hold, but they will die here. You can see the Dale shield sticking out among the very deep orc corpses. I imagine this is not a pleasant place to be right about now. But again, we can see the pikes down. That's always a nice sight to see. The Rudar pikemen. Again, the Rudar pikes look like they're shorter, but they do still have the same range, so it's kind of weird. Like, it'll look like the dwarf is actually taking damage from thin air, that the Rudar pike has sort of thrusted at him, and now this is what you want to see. You want to see a unit forcing their way through the line, and this is it. This is the sign that we have finally broken through, and that Gundabad and Mordor will finally be able to begin their assault on the town centre. And that means we're entering the final stage of the battle. It's been a grind, but we're getting there. And so who will win? The dwarves have got all of their best stuff still in reserve, but they're sending some of it around to try and flank me, so if we pour into the town centre, that's pretty much game over, because of all these pikes and all the numbers we have to deploy. That'll be it. Even the dwarves will not be able to get back in, and they will not be able to retake the town centre with all of this, so they need to hold it. And we still have reserves. We still have the Witch Realm Blackguard and Hammer Guard from Gundabad and my Blackback, so it's not like we have nothing against these high tier units. And the Earls, they're not armor piercing, so they're honestly not the biggest threat. They are tough to break down, but they're not the biggest threat. If we look over here, the Earls are basically forming the first line of defence on both sides in shield wall. Not a bad decision, to be honest with you. It allows them to take the brunt, and they will take a good deal of punishment with their round shields and the sword masters in reserve, with pikes backing them up as well on both sides. Avari pikes on my side, so that's very unfortunate for me. Meanwhile, back over here, you can see the guards of Khazad-dûm waiting. They don't really want to take any unnecessary casualties over here, but the heavy goblin halberds are routing, so they won't take any unnecessary casualties now. So they served me well, but ultimately they have fallen by the wayside. Now it's going to be a case of one unit of slightly depleted axe throwers and guards of Khazad-dûm against a unit of very depleted heavy goblin halberds and blackback berserkers. That's going to be a close fight, and ultimately it does mean that this flanking force is not really going to have what it takes to break me from the field when my other two units begin their attack on the town centre itself. And well, if we look back down here, it might be best to actually flick it into ×2 speed. As the Gundabad army begins their assault, they will be making the first attack, because of course they went very pike heavy, and while that's not the fastest way of breaking through a defence, it is still pretty effective. Again, there are still some Ironfoot guards in here, I believe, but they are now completely doomed. being swamped by Snaga and Halberds, Uruks. Moria filled with orcs once again. What would Durin think? Well, not just orcs, I guess. Rudauer. I don't know what the... Well, I guess the dwarf opinion on the Rudauer would be negative, but again, better than orcs. I'm excited for Rudauer to be their own faction, actually. I've always kind of liked the Rudauer style. It's kind of like a sort of more cold weather variant of Rohan with more browns as colours. I do like it, and I'll be interested to see what they offer as a faction. I imagine they're going to be a slightly more heavy duty, maybe slightly more aggressive variant of Eriador. And Eriador received some significant changes in the new patch, which will hopefully make them a bit more competitive. So now we'll go back down to 1 speed as these pikes really get into the face of these Earls. Victory seems certain for the Earls, but now defeat seems certain because of the sheer number of pikes. And the Rudauer pikes are no joke. They are durable indeed. So the Ironfoot pikes are going to have to come forward. They don't want to send in the Swordmasters because they'll likely just be poked to death. They want to save them for the more elite units. The units that they are more suited to fighting, such as the Witch Realm Blackguard. But again, these pikes, they're also going to be reinforced with the Witch Realm pikes eventually as well when they get their fat asses up the hill. If we look here, my orcs still waiting in reserve. If we look over here, the fight has commenced. The Guards of Khazad-dûm just hanging back a little bit. That means the axe throwers are just going to get absolutely butchered by the Blackback Berserkers. But it's going to be a close fight, this one. The Blackback Berserkers are designed to take on units like the Guards of Khazad-dûm, but the Guards of Khazad-dûm are so good, they typify the heavy infantry units so much that they will stand a chance against the Blackbacks. But it is going to be a bloody fight, and it's just more death. And it's more death that we are more equipped to deal with than the defenders, as it often turns out in these sorts of battles. Again, I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for the Guards of Khazad-dûm as well. For so long they were the strongest, only to have that title taken from them by their Mithril Guard brethren. The Guards of Khazad-dûm fighting near the bridge of the same name against filthy goblins and orcs of the Misty Mountains. So yeah, that will continue. If we look over here, well, let's see. So the balance of forces is evenly matched, as it should be. The Halberds will also play a part in that. It'll make it so that the Guards of Khazad-dûm can't just force their way through without taking losses. Meanwhile, back over here, we can see this, and I haven't made my attack yet because my ally did tell me to wait until the catapult was there, but the catapult is taking so long. But here we can just see the pikes, and it's nice to see pikes being useful for once. Again, they can be useful, but it's just, I feel like they're a little underpowered as it stands. But hopefully we can see them return to their former glory one day, or at least a portion of their former glory, maybe not as strong as they used to be. They're still kryptonite to cavalry, but I feel as though in a choke point they should still be a little bit more effective. As it stands, you kind of have to have a unit of spears and shield wall in front of them for them to be effective. Maybe that's just the way they have to play now. Maybe I just have to accept that you cannot just bulk up pikemen anymore. Although my ally is making good cases to why you could still try and do that. Meanwhile, if we look over here, I finally decide that enough waiting around. I also noticed that the Sons of Durin are actually trying to flank around with the Guards of Khazad-dûm, so I need to make my assault quick so that we can really put pressure on the town centre. So my Orc bodyguard is charging in, my other unit of Blackbacks is charging in, and the dismounted Earls will stand no chance against the Blackbacks, supported by a slightly tankier unit of Orc bodyguard. They will get ripped apart, and these pikes, they don't want to get out of position, so they are just going to sit here and hold. So it's going to be an interesting situation that we find themselves in. And if we look over here, the Sons of Durin are marching around as well, and that will tip the fight of this. Well, it will tip this fight in their favour. And as we can see, defeat is almost a certainty for the Guards of Khazad-dûm at this point.
Victory will be ours.
But the Sons of Durin will smash their way through the Blackbacks. They're exactly the sort of unit that the Blackbacks don't want to fight, simply because they're so good on the attack. And the mass as well, of course, it will disrupt the ranks. So that's why at this point my army is, I've consigned my army to basically being killed eventually. What I want to do is I want to get inside the town centre and form up at least a defence around that flanking force. and that means getting through these Earls and through that unit of pikemen. If we look back over here, finally we're giving the defenders a real taste of their own medicine. The catapult is able to fire point blank into the sword masters, and there's not much they can do about it. They need to stay on. They need to stay here so they can quickly charge in if needed. But ultimately, it's going to lead to their demise. Look at all those planets in the background as well. Oof. Finally, the artillery is being kind to us. In the early game, it was so brutal. I mean, if we go back over to here, through all the dead bodies, this was the site of one of the most brutal artillery bombardments I've ever seen. I mean, just look at all the crispy bodies there. I mean, Gundabad and Mordor were both given what for by the Dale catapult, but in the end, look at all these bodies. In the end, they were able to force their way up to the town centre, and they still have reserves, although not many. The Mordor player does have numbers, but the Gundabad player is the one taking the lead here with the berserkers and the pikes. And that's a good move, I think. I think that the Gundabad army is much better equipped to deal with this. The Mordor player hopefully will be able to flood into the town centre and give us the numbers to prevent the flanking force of dwarves, because inevitably the Sons of Durin are going to be able to smash through my blackbacks. Keeping an eye on the mini-map over there, when that green disappears is when the dwarves have broken through. But, you know, we do need to hurry up in that sense. Oof. And again, getting more kills, this time on a Variel, the pikemen. Cutting a line down through them. Cutting them down to size. Again, more kills. Getting a ton of kills on both Earls and my blackbacks. Honestly, probably... But that doesn't matter, as long as we can force our way through more quickly, I'm okay with that. Look at the Earls. A very sexy unit indeed, but not really equipped to deal with this sort of thing. At least not without support and the callous Avari elves just watching their allies die, bracing and waiting. But who can blame them? Again, the Avari Elder Pikemen at one point were one of the most OP units in the game. Maybe less so now, but again, if we look over here, might be best to actually kick it into ×2 speed while this fight is going on, because pikes against pikes, you know what to expect from that sort of battle. One of the catapults is in the wall. That's interesting. Again, pokey. It's a slow process, but there's a certain air of inevitability about it. So again, I guess it's a rather sadistic way of winning the fight. Again, you can't see the dwarves circling around the corner just yet. There's still green on that mini-map. These are Variels, what must they be thinking? And actually this unit will demonstrate why I think pikes need a bit more mass in and of themselves in a moment, because guess what happens? I force my way into them. Again, these Earls, very much backs to the walls. They tried their best, but ultimately after losing Lake Town, after losing Dale, after retreating to Moria, they will be cut down like dogs. Tragic. Tragic in the end. And again, they still hold. They held for quite a long time, and time is something I don't have a lot of with that flanking force. Again, look at that guy. He's really taking a pounding. Oh my god. In the background over there. The catapult getting even closer, adding insult to injury, killing more sword masters. Again, it's only a matter of time, you'd think. And here we go.
Control of the battle is very much in our favor. Victory will be ours. The enemy are badly
Fighting my way into these pikemen.
lost half their men.
Defeat is a distinct possibility, and I don't force my way into them immediately. I decide that after a few kills I will do that, and again you can still see this Legionnaire, what a hero. He's been in the fight since very early on in the battle, and he's still there, fighting on, in and amongst these pikemen, using his tower shield to good effect. But it's really the blackbacks which are doing the bulk of the damage here, shredding their way through the pikemen. And if we look back over here, it's slow going, but again, inevitable. The line is thinning. All of these pikes poised to take the town centre. So more and more it is looking like, again, at one point we were 16 points behind in terms of percent, but now we are ahead, 5% ahead. And at this point in the battle, that means that it's basically game over for the attackers. It's not completely over if that flanking force can make it. There's still a bit of green over there though, as you can see. I just missed another artillery hit, which again landed square on. But it's just relentless. And the defenders did well, but ultimately I think maybe what the defenders did wrong in many ways was they used their, maybe not so much their catapults did a fantastic job even if it was against lower tier units, but I think their skirmishers, particularly the Dalian player with his Athala Rangers and Dalian Marksmen, he used all of his ammo on units that were trash, when he should have been using them on units that were a little bit more mid-tier, I think, like the Gundabad Pikes and the Mordor Halberds. They would have been the perfect unit to focus down. Their line probably would have held up for longer. Again, those Dalian Marksmen could have been used better. And again, defensive mistakes in this sort of battle where it's 3 armies against 2, they're amplified much more than attacking mistakes. And again, I made a conscious mistake of not bringing any archers, and in the end I wasn't punished too greatly for it. Ironically, my allies were punished more in the same vein than I was, and they did bring archers. The Rudar Berserkers against the front line now though, and they have a bit more bite to them. Ugh. Brutal. Those sword masters have basically been melted by the catapult alone. I'm back over here. It's only a matter of time before I start pushing in. There's only 92 pikes left, and that means the mass is going down. They are elves. Elves don't have much mass. They have a lot of skill, but not much mass. When was the last time you saw a fat elf? The dwarves are more the massy ones. I wonder what the dwarves feel about elves being in Moria. Again, I don't know much about the Avari elves in lore. Their armour looks cool though. Definitely a big fan of their look. And they are strong. Again, I don't know what's going to happen with the Avari elves. I think actually they're going to be staying with Dale in the long run, because I don't think they're going to be part of their own faction, because there simply isn't enough there to flesh them out. Like, I know that the Veil of Dorwinion is a thing in Divide and Conquer, but I'm not sure that's going to be a thing here. Mainly because they want the factions to be big and expansive in Reforged, so you have a lot of options, whereas Dorwinion, there isn't really much. Like, you couldn't really make a faction as big as some of the others with Dorwinion. Oh, there goes the Dale General. And at this point, it's not looking good. Now, these units are in reserve and they need to move. If they don't close these gaps, if we get into the town centre, that's pretty much it. Look at these Rudar Berserkers with their hexagon shields. Again, one of Gundabad's hidden gems, I think, of a unit, but of course they won't be keeping them for much longer. With Rudauer on the horizon. Rudauer, I think, will probably be the first new faction we get, or if not them, the Blue Mountains Dwarves, because well, at least half of their units are already in the game, just part of a different faction. Now here comes the push, the Hammer Guard, ripping their way into the settlement. You can see that I'm starting to do this as well, starting to push in, and this is pretty much game over. The dwarves, the green over there is still there, but it is routing now, so that does mean they were able to finish off my flanking force, but not in time, and this is it. This is game over, and unfortunately the replay will finish in just a moment because there was a crash, but I'm glad that it happened now because it does mean that I'm at least able to show it, because this was game over. Like, they were too static over here, and I guess the Dwarven player didn't move in because I think he was the one that crashed, so that is a bit of a shame. But it doesn't really matter because at this point it was game over. So that was the Battle of Moria, and unfortunately for the Free Peoples of Middle-earth, the Dwarves and Dale have been utterly defeated, and I know that they did lose in the War of the Ring in the north anyway to the Easterlings. This is a bit of a what-if scenario if the Orcs chase them back to a reclaimed Moria, and the Orcs won. So the Dwarves and Dale, they will not see the light of a new day. So hopefully Aragorn in the south can lead the armies to battle at the Black Gate, and hopefully Frodo can destroy the ring as happened in the movies. But maybe not. Maybe Middle-earth now belongs to the Orcs instead. So let's go back to the main menu, shall we? But yes, I hope you enjoyed that, and as I said, the next video will hopefully be a little bit of a preview on the next patch. Again, there's no new units, but there is a lot of reworking, there's a lot of new mechanics that can go, well, not new mechanics, but there's a lot of new things that I can talk about, a lot of tweaks, shall we say, important ones as well, because obviously balance is key in a multiplayer only mod, well, a multiplayer focused mod, shall we say. But yes, I did hope to do Minas Tirith, but there were a few issues with that, and actually I think I will speak about in the next patch a few things that players should do when they play this game, because there is a lot of issues with crashing and with all that sort of thing if you don't follow a few steps. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you join me for the next video, which will of course be a patch update overview.